for accepting our invitation. And secondly, also, we would like to hear some hints about Chopin and his music. And Serhambali is maybe the best name for this in Turkey. He had an interest in classical music, and also he's the editor-in-chief of the main classical music journal or magazine in Turkey, and he add a lot to the Turkish classical music world. So I'm very excited. I'm very lucky to have them as speakers today. And first, I would like to invite Serhan to give his introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Karadağ, Bülent Bey, and it's a really tremendous honor to be among you, and also with esteemed Dr. Michal Witt, who is a very important figure in terms of everything related to Chopin, and especially, of course, his heart and what exactly happened to his heart. So, and thank you for accepting me, and I will try to give a generalized view on Chopin and his music, and I will try to make it, I will try to summarize it as much as I can in half an hour, and then we'll give this opportunity to Dr. Witt. Frédéric Chopin is a very much loved composer, both in the world and also in Turkey. So maybe because he's one of the greatest romantic composers, and many people, many music lovers have a special affinity, I think, towards romantic period, which is, broadly speaking, 19th century music. And we know that Chopin, Frédéric François Chopin, is one of the initiators, one of the first big names in this big tradition, which is 19th century music. And after him, many big names also came and had inspiration also from Chopin. And we also know that Chopin was one of the first important national school composers, or nationalist composers, let's say. So what does this mean? Up until that time, classical music, what we call classical music, was a playground of, Central European countries and composers from those countries, especially German, Austrian, and maybe French, Italians, of course. But by the beginning of 19th century, the most important happenings in the social area. We know of that. We know, of course, the irredentist movements, and Poland is, of course, played a very important role in this. And Poland has a very troubled history. We know that it was torn down between the three biggest powers in Europe, Prussia, to name them, Prussia, Habsburgs, and Russians. And the Russians, of course, was a major actor in the Polish history, especially beginning from the end of the 18th century, beginning from the Catherine the Great. And Chopin was born in 1810, very close to Warsaw, in a village called Żelazowa Wola, some 40 kilometers, I think, far away from Warsaw. So when he was born, Poland was, of course, torn apart between these three powers, and Russians were controlling the geographical part, which, Warsaw was also in. So until 1830, Chopin was living in Poland, in the partitioned Poland, in Warsaw or around Warsaw. But we can easily say that in this 20 years of time, Chopin was much more an urbanistic people, an urban gentleman, a city gentleman. And Warsaw was an important city in Eastern European geography. And Chopin, of course, took his first lessons in music in Warsaw, and he had some prominent teachers. For example, one of his teachers was Józef Elsner, an important figure, a Silesian composer. And we also know that Józef Elsner, his first important teacher, gave him some very important aspects of counterpoint, and Bach, for example, he taught him the fundamentals of Bach, Baroque period, and Mozart also. And these two composers were also very favorites of Chopin throughout his whole life. And we can easily say that apart from his conservatory training and his first musical education, he also got this awareness of Bach and Baroque counterpoint, also Mozart, from Józef Elsner, who was active in Warsaw at that time. So yes, as I said, Chopin also had 3 years of conservatory training in Warsaw Conservatory, and Józef Elsner was actually his teacher there. And but as a matter of fact, I mean, Chopin, like all the other biggest names in classical music, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, nearly every big classical music composer we can name, he was more or less autodidact. I mean, he also learned a lot himself from, partitions, from what he heard. And what did he hear when he was in Poland? This is very important when we try to understand Chopin's world, and Chopin's world of colors, world of some melodies. This is a very important aspect of Chopin's compositional method. Chopin learned the essence of national Polish music. When we read the most important works and essays about Chopin's life and his way of composing, we also learn that Chopin had a very high awareness towards these authentic Polish national dances and melodies, etc. We know that Poland for years had certain dances, certain folkloric dances. These are, for example, Kujawiak, Krakowiak, and Polonaise, Polacca, or in other words, and Oberek, and Mazurka, also called Mazur. And these 5 wonderful dances, I think, it is believed that were central to Chopin's life and Chopin's work. We also know that he was, as I said, living in Warsaw. He was a city man, but he was also going to the villages. He was sometimes spending his holidays in some areas of Poland. For example, I remember that I was not living in Chopin's time, but from the things that I read about Chopin's life, I very well remember that he used to spend his summer holidays, when he was 14 and 15, in a region called Zawarnia, which is a region, I think, in Kujawia region. Dr. Witt, of course, knows it more than me. Kujawia region has a certain folkloric dance, as I said earlier, Kujawiak. And we know that there are certain elements in Chopin's music which evokes and which transfers the rhythms. Of course, these are all rhythmic patterns that Chopin, now there are 2 methods that Chopin used in his compositions. He either transferred the rhythms, and he either transferred the authentic Polish national melodies, folkloric melodies, but this is rare. This is not very usual way of Chopin's compositional, way of composing, let's say. But there is another way which shows us Chopin's unique talent and unique genius, and that is Chopin's way of creating pseudo-authentic Polish national melodies. I mean, Chopin had a wonderful stylized idea of what these Polish folkloric melodies are, because he was raised with these melodies, but he tried to imitate them, and because he had a profound knowledge of them, he created wonderful, unique, but very unique. I mean, those melodies are all his. I'm telling about the mainly whole of Chopin repertoire, his polonaises, his mazurkas, his waltzes, preludes, etudes, etc., etc. When we look at them, we can see that these are all original melodies, but has a clear concept of Polish national idiom. This is Chopin's unique genius. I mean, because he had a wonderful imagination. He had all the clues in order to compose in a Polish way, in a nationalized way. But he didn't only use the way of extracting those melodies and put it into his compositions and making counterpoints with them, etc. For example, Piotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky used very much rustic, very much village, folkloristic, Ukrainian, etc. melodies in his works. We know that. But Chopin was something different. So this Polish period gave us mainly Chopin's works for piano and orchestra. I already have a playlist on my Spotify profile. You can take a look at my profile also on Spotify. So I have several playlists which I made for my presentations and seminars, etc. And when we look at Chopin's 20-year period in Warsaw and in Poland, generally speaking, we can easily see that Chopin mainly composed his works for piano and orchestra. He has six works, concertante works, we call them, works for piano and orchestra. And okay. Yeah. I'm not playing melodies now. Oh, okay, it stopped. Okay, I will give you an example now. I will try to give you an example now. He composed 2 piano concertos, dear friends, 2 wonderful piano concertos, and we cannot generally say that these 2 piano concertos had Polish folkloric melodies in it. I mean, all the movements in those concertos, which has 6 movements in total. I mean, 3 times 2. No, I mean, only the 3rd movement in the 2nd piano concerto is a very nice Krakowiak, which is a dance from the Krakow region. And it's a wonderful melody. Let's hear it a bit. Or his Andante spianato e gran polonaise brillante. Here, for example, this movement is one of his polonaises using the piano and orchestra. fanfare opening the second movement, which is a polonaise. Polonaise, by the way, is, I think, the most powerful and the most famous Polish dance in the world, because beginning from the 18th century, also Central European classical music composers tend to use polonaises in their compositions. For example, Beethoven was very fond of his last movement from his triple concerto is a polacca. Rondo alla polacca was a format, was a tempo marking that composers used to prefer a lot. Also, Russian composers loved polonaise and used this rhythmic dance in their compositions. Let's see variations, La ci darem la mano variations. This was the first composition of Chopin that first got the attention of a very famous composer who was Schumann. Schumann loved Chopin very much. He admired him, though Chopin did not have the same feelings, we must say, to Schumann, also to Liszt. But Schumann admired him, and when he heard this piece, La ci darem la mano variations, which is a theme from Mozart's opera Don Giovanni, La ci darem la mano, Schumann wrote in the critique this sentence: "Hats off, gentlemen, a genius." He used this word. He used this sentence for Chopin. So alla polacca. This is also a direct influence from the Polish national melodies. The last movement of La ci darem la mano variations, 8th movement, alla polacca. Now, after Chopin left Poland, why did he leave Poland? Because he wanted to have a big name. He was believing in himself. He believed that he was a genius, and Poland and Warsaw was not the center of music, of classical music in Europe, we must admit. But where was the center? Where were the centers? Vienna, maybe. But Paris would be the last point for Chopin, and he would spend his last 18 years, let's say, up until he died 1849. He would spend his last 18 years in Paris. So when he went to Paris, Chopin had a wonderful opportunity, a wonderful chance. He found a very strong Polish diaspora in Paris, because after this, partitions, which was a great catastrophe for Poland, after 1795 and after 1831, the great, upheaval that Polish people made towards the Russian occupying forces, and when Russians, raised down everything in Poland, in Warsaw especially. Thousands of people, thousands of intellectuals, middle-class families, royals, etc., left Poland and went to France. And they built up there a wonderful community of a Polish diaspora. And when Chopin made Paris his home in 1831, he found, these Polish people around him, hugging him and believing in him, believing in his talents, in his genius. And Chopin, from that time on, from 1831, was a symbolic figure, was a cultural figure, was a musical figure of this Polish diaspora in Paris. And he was always invited, to their meetings, to their balls, to their parties. For example, I can give you an example of Hotel Lambert, for example. This is a very iconic place in Paris. Hotel Lambert was purchased by a very wealthy magnate, in a Polish sense, a magnate of Polish history, Adam Czartoryski, and they were, setting up balls in this hotel, and Chopin was always one of the honorable guests in these balls, and he was playing his wonderful compositions, especially his polonaises. For example, he has some wonderful polonaises. Chopin's polonaises tend to reflect his military, tend to reflect his masculine, side, whereas nocturnes or waltzes or mazurkas tend to reflect his playful, his maybe naive, his more romantic, lyrical side. But polonaises has a very rhythmically, they are very strong, they are very playful, and they have an agenda. Yeah, I mean, they tend to, and practically, they were raising the awareness of Polish national identity in both diaspora and then many years later in the Republic of Poland. I will tell it later on, but now I want to give you an example about of one of his polonaises, and that's heroic polonaise. He has wonderful polonaises, but two of them are very important musically and historically. One of them is military, Opus 40, number 1, and the other is heroic, Opus 53. Both of them are very hard to play, but they are very lively. They're full of energy, and they're full of romanticism, Polish romanticism. They are not taking their inspiration directly from Polish national folk idioms. They are also Chopin's own creative, products. But for example, heroic. Why heroic? Chopin didn't want to give his compositions names. Chopin didn't want to give any names to none of his compositions. But this name came out from Georges Sand's, imagination, because it was the year of 1848, and revolutionary time in Europe. So working classes, women were looking for their rights, etc. And Georges Sand was a socialist woman at the same time, and she was very when she heard this piece, this heroic, this Opus 43, Opus 53, sixth Polonaise, she exclaimed, "Yes, this will be the symbol of revolution. What a heroic piece! What a heroic symbol!" she said, and from that time on, this piece was nicknamed Heroic Polonaise. During the 1939 Nazi, period in Polish times, Polish radio used to broadcast this Polonaise daily, every time, to raise the awareness, of Polish nationalism, and of course Nazis were very oppressive about this attitude, and they banned the broadcast. Also, they erased everything related to Chopin, because Chopin was a symbol of upheaval from 1830s until 1930s. Very, very interesting. Also, this military Polonaise is very important and very famous. And yeah, let's hear it a bit. Ladies and gentlemen, now I have very short time left. So mazurkas, I want to speak about mazurkas, because mazurkas, yeah, they tend to reflect Chopin's love of Polish folkloric music and Polish folkloric dances, because Mazur, which is stemming from the Mazovia region also has Warsaw, you know, as its capital, a very important region, and Mazur is the folkloric dance, the folkloric dance of this region. And today I know that so many people in Poland love to dance mazurka. When I was in Poland for a reason a couple of years ago, I happened to come across a mazurka lesson, open to public, and it was free of charge. People were entering into the building, a very large building, and they were suddenly starting to, you know, dance mazur, and we did the same, though I didn't have any idea how to dance mazur or mazurka. It was a very lively, a very social dance. So mazurka type Chopin compositions is also a favorite of Turkish pianist İdil Biret. And I know very well that İdil Biret also learned to dance mazurka in order to execute these recordings faithfully. She told me that she learned how to dance mazurka. And with these recordings, she also got a medal, a very important medal from Polish Chopin Society. Let's hear one of the mazurkas. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as far as Chopin's other compositions works, for example, his ballades don't have very specific Polish national idioms in themselves, and ballad is a very hybrid type of composition. Ballad has some meanings in literature and also in music, and Chopin created a very unique genre in terms of his ballades. He has 4 ballades, and they are some 8 to 10 minutes long, and technically they are very, very hard to play, and they have great meanings in themselves, and they are both literally and both musically very lively and very wonderful. They have very wonderful colors in themselves. And some academicians, some musicologists tend to say that Chopin had Adam Mickiewicz and his poems in mind while he was composing these ballades. But there are not very concrete evidences in terms of this, because Chopin did not take any poems of Adam Mickiewicz while he was composing these works. And his other works, for example, his piano sonatas, he has 3 piano sonatas, and the most famous of those sonatas are his second, which we also know Marche Funèbre or Funeral March Sonata, because of the very famous second movement. you know. And the third sonata is also very popular and a very good work. So nocturnes, yeah, maybe we can finish with nocturnes. Nocturnes are also Chopin's least nationalistic works. He wasn't inspired mainly from, you know, Krakowiak, Kujawiak, Oberek, Mazurek, Polonaise, whatever. No, he had some very romantic ideals in his mind, and these are very colorful works also, but very romantic night pieces, as they are called. And Chopin had an inspiration before he started to compose nocturnes. And John Field, for example, an Irish composer who happened to work in Russia, in Russian Empire, was the foremost composer of nocturnes. But Chopin's nocturnes, of course, surpasses John Field's nocturnes in every terms. I mean, he excelled in this type of composition. In nocturnes, he has peerless. I mean, he doesn't have any rivals, including John Field, because these are like, you know, operatic arias. And Chopin had a wonderful, Chopin loved opera so much. I mean, while he was in Warsaw and while he was in Paris, he always went to operas, Warsaw Opera, Opéra de Paris, and bel canto opera. Of course, the opera of Chopin's time was bel canto opera, and bel canto opera means Rossini, Bellini, and Donizetti. Bellini, especially, was Chopin's favorite, and he had a very good friendship with Bellini also. And Bellini's long melodic lines, his legato, had a very profound impact on Chopin. And while he was composing his nocturnes, he got wonderful inspiration from Bellini and his long and wonderfully legato lines. So nocturnes, okay, let's remember nocturnes. And of course, waltzes. I'm sorry, waltzes. Waltzes also, waltz was beginning to gain enormous popularity in Chopin's times, and all over Europe, people were dancing in waltz rhythms, tribal rhythm, and it was a wonderful opportunity also for Chopin. But Chopin's waltzes were not pieces to dance. You know, that was those were more concert pieces to play. And he had some wonderful compositions also in this type, for example, genre, minute waltz, for example. These clink, clink, clink, these are the bells of Georges Sand's dog, little dog, Marquise. This clink, clink, this grace notes. He got inspiration, yeah, from Georges Sand's little dog Marquise. Okay, so etudes and preludes. Oh, I have to remind you the revolutionary etude, of course. When he heard that Russians crashed, you know, Polish upheaval ferociously, he went out of control. His mind, his brain went out of control, and Chopin was in terror. So he is believed to write this revolutionary etude in 1831. Ladies and gentlemen, lastly, I want to give you I want to offer you a wonderful recording. Now, we have some foreigners also among us, friends from countries abroad. And I want them to know that we have a wonderful soprano, we have a wonderful opera artist, soprano Leyla Gencer. Leyla Gencer had a Turkish father and a Polish mother. And yeah, she was raised by her Polish mother. And of course, she knew Polish very well. And she had a wonderful recording of Chopin's songs. Chopin also got inspiration from Polish folk music, and when he got inspiration, he also composed wonderful songs. And Leyla Gencer, our soprano, sang these songs with wonderful pianist Nikita Magalov. And I want you to also listen to these songs. These are very well executed, very well sung songs. Let's hear one of them, and I will gladly give this microphone or give the place to Dr. Witt. Okay, let's hear one of them. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure for me to share my knowledge about Chopin and his compositions. Thank you for listening to me, and I am now very glad that I will listen to Dr. Witt now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Valle. Yeah, it was great, and it was a really great trip to Chopin's life and his music, and I'm sure that everybody liked. Now the second part will be the medical part, and I'm honored to invite Professor Michal Witt to give his talk.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you, Dr. Karadağ, for inviting me. I'm honored by this invitation, and alluding to what Mr. Bali presented. I mean, it was a superb review of all cultural aspects of general cultural aspects of Chopin's music. And well, thank you very much for pointing to these important Polish dances. I remember one of the, yeah, I agree that Idol Biret is fantastic in mazurkas. That's absolutely the highest level and a special feeling. Why I'm saying this? Because mazurka is so terribly idiomatic. It is, you know, it is almost like waltz, but it has nothing to do with waltz, and has nothing to do, but with what it has anything to do. I mean, you have a special feeling. Idol Biret evidently does have it. And I remember one of the very famous Polish pianists who was asked, what would you say to your young students when they try to play mazurkas? First of all, I will tell them, don't play them. You have to be older. Second, if you want to know how to play mazurka, listen to Rubinstein. All right, so this was just a remark, unplanned. And now let's get to medical part, and I will just try to. Okay. All right. Can you see my slides?
Unfortunately, no.
No. All right. Again.
push the red button and share, please.
Share screen. Oh, share. Okay. Sorry. Now.
Yeah, okay.
No, fine. All right. You know, I'm a geneticist by specialty. So, as you know, geneticists always start, whatever they do, they start with a pedigree. And for a geneticist, of course, not the particular person is of importance, because usually it presents this or that. But it's also always the matter of being embedded in a family. Let's make a short review of Chopin's family. Why I'm not changing my slide? All right, okay. It has some. All right. It's Chopin's family. Frédéric Chopin was the only son of Mikołaj Chopin, Nicolas. He was French on origin, and his Polish mother, Justyna Krzyżanowska de Domo. And he had 3 sisters, older Ludwika Jędrzejewicz. I'll mention her later on. Isabella and Emilia. Emilia died when she was 14 years of age. And in fact, she was suffering from something very similar to her brother. But let's review swiftly the life of Frédéric Chopin. He was born in Żelazowa Wola, as already was mentioned by Mr. Bali, in 1810. And from the very early childhood, he was a child of poor health. And during his lifetime, he was presenting evidently the chronic lung disease with chronic cough, dyspnea, expectoration of the sputum, hemoptysis at the very end. But when he was 16, he presented swollen cervical lymph nodes. So it's worth to note and worth to remember. He died 1849 in Paris, in the presence of his older sister Ludwika, and the autopsy was performed by the famous Parisian anatomist and physician Jean Creveillet. And unfortunately, the report of this autopsy has been lost. It's burned in the fire of police archives in Paris in 1871. We know from various sources that Frédéric Chopin expressed his will that after his death, his heart will go back to Poland. He obviously was aware there is no chance he can get back to Poland, but it was kind of a romantic, patriotic will expressed by Frédéric Chopin that his heart will go there after his death. Well, this is romantic and, as I said, patriotic, emotional version, but the more down-to-earth and medical explanation is possible taphophobia. It's psychopathic fear of being buried alive. It's not this rare. There is quite a number of important figures who suffered from this. The first one which comes to my mind is Alfred Nobel, who suffered from taphophobia, Alan Edgar Poe, and so on. So we have two versions, one not excluding the other. Why his heart went back to Poland, or as Poland was not existent in these days, to Warsaw. His heart was removed from his corpse and was transported. Here are just the pictures of Żelazowa Wola, and here is his deathbed. Transported by his sister Ludwika back to Warsaw. Well, supposedly under the folds of her skirt. It was after a pretty long time placed in a St. Cross church, which was a parish church of Chopin's family just in the very center of Warsaw. Well, let me just say a couple of words about the war history. I'm not going to lecture you on war history of Poland, but it's worth to mention that Warsaw after the war, or after the Warsaw uprising in 1944, looked like this. It was totally demolished. The city was totally ruined. This is the St. Cross Church, which by some luck remained destroyed, but still the structure is there. The heart was placed in a main nave of this church in a left pillar on the pillar on left hand side, and paradoxically, the heart was taken from there and saved not by Polish troops, by a Nazi division chaplain who removed it from there and handed it over he promised to hand it over to church authorities. Obviously he didn't. He handed it over to military authorities, and the heart itself has been saved for a while by a terrible creature, the SS general Ernst von dem Bach-Zelewski, who after a short period of time handed this over to Polish hands, to the Archbishop of Warsaw, Antoni Szlagowski. Here is the scene which was filmed by German newsreel for propaganda purposes. But as you see, there are military honors given to the object and to this ceremony. After the war, 1945, again, the Chopin's heart was politicized. It's been used by socialist or communist rulers to as a first big occasion to show how generous they are. And as you see, the heart was removed back to the church, where again with military honors by the Archbishop of Warsaw. It's been placed back in the church. This is the St. Cross Church in the Krakowskie Przedmieście Street, just in the very, very center of Warsaw. And this is the main nave of the church. And here is this beautiful epitaph dedicated totally to Frédéric Chopin. And at the very bottom, there is a crypt with the heart. So this is the place. Let's review briefly the disease of Frédéric Chopin. When we look at his daguerreotype taken 2 years before his death, we see the ailing person who doesn't look like a 37 years old male. He definitely looks sick. He definitely looks ailing, and it was exactly how his life was. This is the famous caricature made by Pauline Viardot, and of course it's exaggerating certain features like caricatures usually do. But as you see, we might conclude that cachexia is just what the author of this sketch wanted to emphasize. Arthropathy, well, it is possible. Look at this here, please. This is his death mask made by Clesinger just after his death, the death, and definitely we see the face of a person who was dying in pain. Okay, the medical diagnosis of Frédéric Chopin, within the years, there was plenty. The first one, tuberculosis. Why? Because tuberculosis was very common these days. We'll get back to this afterwards. After a while, the other options were given, and the first one was cystic fibrosis, possible mild form of cystic fibrosis. Is this true or not? I cannot definitely say, but it is cystic fibrosis, as you see, the second on the list. Other ones are alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency causing emphysema, mitral stenosis, idiopathic bronchiectasis, hypogammaglobulinemia, aspergillosis, tricuspid insufficiency, Charcot-Strauss syndromes, hemosiderosis. The catalog is big and long. Some of these diagnoses are better justified, some are not. But still, as you see, a lot of people were digging in the problem within the years. Well, I was involved in cystic fibrosis research for quite a long time, and it was one of the major objects of my professional interest for years. When I was the president of the Polish working group of cystic fibrosis, in year 2000, we organized the meeting, the conference devoted to cystic fibrosis, but it was placed in Zamek Ostrocki, which is the place where institute of Chopin's Institute was situated and is still, and there is a museum of Frédéric Chopin. We published this in 2003. And what are the points to cystic? What point to cystic fibrosis in Chopin? There is a whole list. First, chronic progressive course, wheezing, cough, hemoptysis, significant emaciation, weight loss, and poor exercise tolerance, recurrent respiratory infections, including sinuses and larynx, need for a fat-free diet. After the dietary errors, Chopin suffered from severe diarrhea. There was a heat stroke when he traveled to Mallorca. Arthropathy of maybe pulmonary origin, lack of offspring. Chopin remained childless well, you have to keep in mind that he lived with George Sand for quite a long time, and of course he had plenty of romances. Who didn't have romances in Paris these days? But his life with George Sand was quite long. And does it point to infertility? Question mark. Well, death of his sister Emilia at age 14 And we might interpret this as a family aggregation, which of course for geneticists is always very important. And if we look at the pedigree of Chopin's, there are two affected persons in one generation. It might point to autosomal recessive inheritance like cystic fibrosis. And last but not least, the autopsy result described by Cuvier as his heart was more affected than his lungs. Was it cor pulmonale? Well, definitely this list of symptoms can be interpreted as possible cystic fibrosis. No doubt about it. But there are some buts. But the easy to show but is that in pulmonary CF we have this symptom of clapped fingers. They look like this. Obviously, all people dealing with CF know how it happens. It's just disfiguration of phalanges, distal phalanges. And well, did Chopin have anything like this? No, for sure not. We know the cast of his left hand, performed again by Clesinger after his death, and definitely doesn't look like clapped fingers. Okay, so if we think about genetic analysis, what can we rely on? We need some biological material. Well, his body is buried in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, so it's a property of French Republic, no access. There are some locks of hair which are being on display in several Chopin's museums. This is the one being on permanent display in Warsaw, but all these locks of hair are cut hair. And we know that for genetic analysis, we need hair buds. So this cannot be used for further research, genetic research. Well, but as I said, we still have his heart. It is in Poland. It is in Warsaw. It is resting. It's resting just right in the crypt, which is shown on this picture. The heart itself has been inspected and seen the last time in 1945. It was just exactly at the time of this very special event of putting back the heart into the church, which pictures I showed you previously. It's been described by a famous Polish musicographer, not musicologist. He was not a musicologist, but he was a musicographer. Bronisław Edward Sydow. He was actually shown on the picture with just next to Archbishop Szlagowski, but he was not a medical professional. So his description of the heart is far of being a reliable source of medical information. The original of this account is being kept and stored in Chopin's museum in Warsaw. So in 2014, it was decided that the next inspection of Chopin's heart has to be performed. It was such a decision was made because of the fear that the heart itself might be not in a very good condition. It hasn't been overlooked since 1945, so for almost 70 years. the routine in anatomical museums is an inspection at least once every 50 years. So the decision was made by Polish authorities and by church authorities together to go for such an inspection, and it's been, I had an honor to participate in it together with Professor Tadeusz Dobosz, who is shown here on this picture, together with Polish Minister of Culture of these days and Mr. Zdrojewski, the director of the Institute of Frédéric Chopin in Warsaw, and also the Archbishop of Warsaw was present. The box from the crypt was taken, and as you see here on this left-hand picture, there are two boxes, the outer one looking like an oak one, and the inner one of black color with the silver tin plates on the lid stating the dates of birth and date of death. What is important that the day of birth is here is shown as March 1st. There is still a debate. It was March 1st or February 22nd. There are two schools. Okay, and in this double box, there is a jar with the heart, which looks like this. As you see, this is the ground glass plug, just, closing this jar. And it was sealed with Vaseline, petroleum jelly, which leaked into the jar, as you see right here. The plug was very tight. The level of the fluid, conservation fluid, went down just no more than half of a centimeter within this 170 years of storage. So it only shows that Cuvier made an absolutely perfect job. What is also seen here, that the conservation fluid is of amber color. Supposedly, this is wine distillate, being of about 60 or 70% of ethanol. At these days, the highest ethanol concentration available. And since this was France, obviously the wine distillate was easily available. And this wine distillate in its consumption form, diluted, is known as brandy. And if it comes from the Cognac region, it's called cognac. Supposedly it is brandy. It is very possible. We know that since French Revolution in France, it's been the brandy was used for tissue conservation. And the description of the heart and of our findings were published in 2018 American Journal of Medicine, and the only picture which we were allowed to publish there is a front picture of the object, and actually here everything what is important can be seen. Let me start from the top. The autopsy cut line, most likely to the size of the heart, which is evidently enlarged, and due to the fact that the heart itself was probably flaccid, very flaccid, due to its hypertrophy, the cut line was made too low. So the heart, the Frédéric Chopin's heart, is divided of both atria, right and left. They should be right here. What is well saved are ventricles, right one, left one. The left ventricle has been incised to inspect the interior and the state of mitral valve. And the as might be concluded from this picture, the heart hypertrophy, which is evident, comes mainly from hypertrophy of the right heart, of the right ventricle, what is understandable due to the pulmonary problem lasting for many years. These little dots here, these little brownish dots, this is most likely the blood dots coagulated here on the surface of the heart. What else? What can be easily seen? There is a whitish, furry coating almost on the on the whole surface of the heart and the whole pericardium. There are also hemorrhagic effusions seen here. And what else? There are these little nodules. There are 3 of them. On this picture, there are 2. The other one is farther on the other side. And they also seem to be very characteristic. This fibrinous coating, you can see that part of these precipitates just float freely in a conservation fluid. The general outlook is evidently cardiomegaly, but what has to be stated that the state of preservation of Chopin's heart is excellent. When we look further, there are some other pictures from other sides, from other angles. So this white furry coating is distributed all over the heart, and this is called by some pathologists as the bread and butter appearance or a frosted heart. This is pericardial fibrinous pericarditis, pericarditis fibrinosa, which is well known for pathologists as a sign of inflammation of the heart tissue, which can be caused by many different reasons. These little nodules this one is actually not this little, it is a diameter of about 1 centimeter, so it's quite large. And this can be interpreted as the tuberculoma, which the last time, at least this is the last time I found in literature, was described in 1948 by American pathologists. And here is the tuberculoma of the heart, of the myocardium. And these lesions we find as signs of the same disease. And the same disease is obviously tuberculosis. Are these lesions the real result of pathology, or are they caused postmortem or not? They are not. They were not, since there are questions, there might be crystals. No, crystals on anatomical objects look like this. Here are mold colonies. They also look different. And here are lipid deposits which can be found on some anatomical objects stored for quite a long time. All these changes appear in anatomical collections in cases of rather lowered level of conservation fluid, which was not the case for Chopin's heart. So, to summarize, all these signs point to most likely to tuberculosis, the frosted heart and bread and butter appearance, typical for pericarditis tuberculosa, pericarditis fibrinosa, pericarditis tuberculosa, which is currently not seen frequently or seen at all. It's rather limited to HIV infected individuals, leading frequently to pericarditis constrictiva. All these changes lead to severe cardiopulmonary insufficiency, and it's obvious. Please keep in mind that in 19th century, tuberculosis was endemic in Northern Europe. 90% of youth, of children and young people below 18 years of age were infected with the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which was not known yet, because it was discovered by Robert Koch in 1982. 1/3 of all death was caused by tuberculosis these days. Well, so what can we say, or what can we state as a probable diagnosis of Chopin, knowing what we have seen during the inspection of 2014? Here's the portrait made by Hadi Karimi of Chopin using, very complicated digital technology. But definitely, most likely, nothing is definite, but most likely, Chopin suffered from chronic tuberculosis with cavitary lesions. This was the reason for hemoptysis. Chronic tuberculosis of the larynx with ulcerative tuberculous enterotitis. Reason for harsh voice and reason for diarrhea. Extreme overload of the right heart with hypertrophy of the heart muscle, cor pulmonale, cardiomegalia for sure. And tuberculous fibrinous pericarditis, pericarditis tuberculosa, which was the immediate cause of death of Frédéric Chopin due to growing severity of this particular disease in the very last stage of Chopin's life. These findings drawn quite a lot of attention. We got the editorial, the first page editorial in Nature. There were plenty of articles in the most important journals all over the world: New York Times, Washington Post, Le Monde, Guardian, and so on. But the question is, what can we do more? Can we do anything more than this? We definitely cannot open the jar with Chopin's heart by any reason. This could make such a difference in the environment when where the tissue is being stored, that it might lead immediately to total destruction of the object. So the jar should be never ever opened. But again, I'm getting back to my genetic habit of looking at the family. There are 2 gravestones of family members of Chopin. His his parents and his sister Emilia. They are buried in the Stare Pawonskie Cemetery in Warsaw, the most important cemetery of this city. Well, these gravestones require renovation anyway, as you see. They are not in a very good state. So when the crypt will be opened, because they have to be open anyway, there is a possibility of totally undestructive sampling the bones, especially skull bones, because they are the best source of biological material of teeth. And using this biological material leading to elution of DNA, we might exclude or say that it might be cystic fibrosis or alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. So genetic diseases can be analyzed this way. Without such an analysis, we are unable to say anything for sure in this manner. Is this possible to do? Yes, it is. In fact, together with Professor Dobos, we were negotiating this with Chopin's Institute in Warsaw, but currently the whole thing is being put on hold. I don't know exactly the reason. All these negotiations are difficult. That's all I can say. Okay, and at the very end, just for your curiosity, were there other composers suffering from tuberculosis? Sorry, from tuberculosis? Yes, of course they were. Karol Szymanowski, another great Polish composer, Karl Maria von Weber, the romantic German composer of the Freischütz, the first romantic opera, Igor Stravinsky, Russian in origin, Edvard Grieg, Norwegian, and Niccolo Paganini, famous violinist, who suffered from the whole collection of diseases. I have another lecture on diseases of great musicians, and Paganini is a primary example. He suffered most likely from Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which helped him in evolution of his instrumental technique. And he also suffered from tuberculosis, most likely, and he also suffered from syphilis, which at these days has been treated quite brutally with mercury, and this was the reason of his death. At the very end, just leaving the medical part, I would like to get back to more artistic vision of Chopin's music. And let me introduce you to the collection of paintings by a famous Polish painter, Duda Gracz, who painted the cycle of 30-something small pictures, each devoted to one particular composition of Chopin. This is just a sample, only 4 of them, but I assure you that they just point exactly to the particular soul of every single composition of Chopin. At this point, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. If I was too long, I'm sorry.
I think it was great, and we wish it not to last. And I will be very happy to also, we will be very happy to listen to your other lecture on the diseases of the composers as well. Thank you very much. And it was a great experience. And I had a question from Professor Dagley asking whether it can be CF or TB. I can guess your answer, but please.
Excuse me, what is the question? Is this
CF plus TB is CF plus TB?
Well, yes, of course. Nobody can exclude this for sure, unless we run the genetic analysis. But CF still, it's hard for me to believe that in 19th century, somebody might live till 39 years of age being a CF patient, even if it was very mild. And together with TB, it's a pretty difficult mixture, you must agree. But, well, as I said, unless we run the genetic analysis, CF cannot be excluded. Alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency cannot be excluded. But as long as we are allowed to do this, we can say something closer about this issue.
Thank you very much. If you may, yes, John wants to ask a question, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and Mr. Bali, for great presentation. I am a student from Marmara University. I want to ask you, when I consider chronic cough and sputum production together with, I remember you said there is no offspring from Chopin, and but he had some love affairs. Can we say he had sterility, and together with sterility and chronic cough, why there is no primary ciliary dyskinesia in the differential diagnosis list?
Well, yes.
I want to ask.
Well, thank you very much for this question. Primary ciliary dyskinesia is just my topic, so you are just pointing exactly to what I'm very interested in. Yes, we cannot say for sure, but if we run, you know, I do a lot of genetic analysis for PCD patients, and some of the cases are extremely difficult genetically speaking. Now we know almost 60 different genes which cause, while mutated, the disorder. So it is very complicated. But you're absolutely right. We cannot exclude none of them. And you're right that PCD is on the list. Absolutely, yes. Sterility in case of Chopin, when this supposition is based exclusively on his life with Georges Sand, well, it has to be taken into account that their relation was probably, or evolved into quickly, from less lover-lover relation, or rather a child and a mother relation, as far as I know the history, and as far as know the history of their relation. So most likely, this was rather the reason of remaining childless. On the other hand, she already had children, so it's hard to interpret this. Definitely we cannot say medically, biologically, we cannot say anything for sure.
And also we are honored to host Dr. Steven Lagerberg with us. He is the founder of the Northwest Council of the Chopin Foundation in the United States. Would you like to say some words, Mr. Lagerberg? Just mute yourself, please.
Microphone.
Yeah.
Am I present now?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your lovely presentations. And Michael, it was lovely to see you again, and loved hearing the details.
Last
agree
time
with-
we have seen each other in Poznan.
Yes, yes, yes. I hope to see you sometime later this year, perhaps. I think everything you've said is right on. I can't think of a thing to add. I do think clinically, because I spent 40 years of my life as a clinical physician, that the course is compatible with this core pulmonale and heart disease, and less so with cystic fibrosis. But again, nobody can be clear at this point. It's just not possible. I would very much love to see someone proceed with the examination of the bone tissue from someone's grave in Poland. I think that would be nice in the next few years if we could put some additional information into this hat, because we're still kind of left in limbo, and that's always a kind of a difficult thing, especially for a physician dealing with a patient who's died. I'd always like to know the cause of death. So anyway, I wish we could proceed with that, but I thank you very much for your presentations, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can say that such an examination will be just the grand finale to the whole thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also, we are lucky to host a famous Turkish musician and academician, Aydın Buke, with us. He has also a book on the life of Chopin. I don't know, maybe he's available or not, but if you want to say a few words, we will be also very happy. Is there any question? Oh, yeah, please.
No, thank you. The both lectures are very well, and I have nothing to add to this. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you. It was an honor for us. Thank you very much.
Mr. Buke, Aydın Bey, it's a tremendous honor for me to make this presentation in front of you.
No,
Thank you so much.
no,
Because
thank you, Serhan. Thank you, Serhan.
Mr. Buke is the only biographer of Chopin in Turkey. So it's very important for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
May I
Serhan,
ask,
for your love.
you're welcome. You're welcome. May I ask a question to Dr. Witt, Bülent Bey?
Of course. Yeah.
Dr. Witt, thank you so much. It was very illuminating for all of us. And thank you for your efforts until this time for Chopin. And I would like to ask you, if this infamous Mallorca holiday, Mallorca voyage didn't happen, would Chopin live another 10 or 15 or 20 years? Because, of course, this is speculation, but as far as we know, I mean, if I'm wrong, please correct me, the doctors had diagnosed tuberculosis, the famous 3 doctors of Mallorca, as far as we know from Chopin's, sayings and his journals, diaries. So that they had diagnosed tuberculosis, and they had a very bad time, that's 100 days in Mallorca. So yeah, what do you think about this?
Well, I'm sure. Well, as far as I know, I'm sure there are other persons more knowledgeable in this. But as far as I know, this famous Mallorca trip was one of the worst things which could happen to Chopin. And definitely, that didn't help him at all with health-wise. Probably it caused to the earlier death. But what has to be kept in mind, that it's always being said that Frédéric Chopin died young. Not true. The average lifespan at these days was about 40 for males. So he was perfectly in a statistic window. But obviously, what we can say, and this is fully justifiable, that he died too early.
Thank you so much.
I would comment, if I may, that I don't think the departure of 54 days going to that island was did huge damage to his health. He was already sick at that point.
Yeah.
And the opium or morphine that he got on the travel back and after he returned was what that saved his life at that point from further hemorrhage. But the weather, I think the weather is not likely to be an issue. And as far as the Spanish doctors diagnosing tuberculosis, well, when you hear hoofbeats, don't think of zebras, is the comment that comes to my mind. I mean, tuberculosis was all around them. This man had the classical symptoms of TB. You don't have to look far for something else at that point. Of course, they had no knowledge of cystic fibrosis, but I just don't think that the travel to Mallorca caused his premature death. I think he was destined for that death anyway. And just think of the music that came out of that place that we love these days. It's just fantastic music.
Yeah, we are grateful that he composed those marvelous preludes, huh?
Well, on the voyage over that evening with George Sand, he composed a piece of music that wound up in one of his nocturnes, Opus 37, number 2, I believe. The song that the boatman sang on the trip from France over to the island. He made that into a song. I mean, gorgeous piece. I mean, so for all kinds of reasons, we can feel thankful that he did wind up there, because it just encouraged his creativity.
I don't want to finish this enormous meeting, superb meeting, but I think it's now to finish it. I think this is an unforgettable event of Turkish pediatric pulmonology world, and we are honored to host maybe the best known figures on the Chopin's medical research on Chopin's death. So it was an honor for us, and also we are very happy to hear musical touches and also the musical voyage of Chopin's life, where Mr. Bali, I think it was great. On behalf of the Pediatric Pulmonology Society, we are thankful to you all and sparing your time. And maybe we can have a chance to have such meetings, not every month, but 2 or 3 times a year. Maybe we can get another appointment from Professor Witt about the diseases and the composers. I think it can be very interesting.
Mr. Karadağ, Ms. Dağlı says we want more.
Yes.
Well, I from my side, I can say that I always believe that such a interdisciplinary meetings are much more interesting than just focus only, professionally. I always say that, speaking about genetics with geneticists is boring. Why? Because they know what I will say, and I know what they will ask. So,
yeah.
Okay. I would like to thank you very much for this very kind invitation, and
Thank you very much.
for such a numerous participation in this meeting. So thank you very much, and I really feel honored to be here.
Thank you very much. And also, I'm also thankful to the speakers as they let us to record this meeting. So I will share the link, and then you can the people who cannot listen and participate can watch this, and it can be fruitful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Witt.